How to make Nuno Felt, Part 1. Nuno is the word for cloth in Japanese. So Nuno Felt is cloth like this beautiful silk combined with wool to give really interesting textured surfaces like this. The wool comes through the silk. This sample is going to be 21 inches wide or 53 centimetres wide. We're going to be using this wool top, it's merino top, and the silk. First job is to thin out the merino top. As we lay this out on the wrong side of the silk, just think it is really, really light. So I only change direction to have one line of wool coming around the perimeter of the piece, just to give it a little bit more strength. We already get a lot of strength in this work because we are adding the wool to a fibre that is already strong. So what we end up with is something incredibly lightweight that is also absolutely wonderful to wear. You can see lots of gaps there. I don't mind the gaps. It's up to you really. You might want to have it really even, but I don't mind. Where those gaps are, we're going to get different textures and different amounts of bubbliness on the other side. You'll see what I mean later. This whole process, by the way, took me about an hour in total. Not an hour with organising, but there was an hour of footage at the end. So it's definitely a project for the weekend artist. Here I'm using a plastic bag to wet down the project. We do this ever so gently. So when you see me doing any wiping movements, my skin is not touching the fabric, because if it was, the stickiness on my hand would lift the wool up. We're also only using a warm, soapy water, not really hot. Now we need to get the excess water out before we do this little rolling motion. This is a little massager. We needed to get the water out because otherwise the wool fibres swim past each other and they don't lock in, and we want them to lock in. So these movements are still what I would call baby movements. I call them that because it's like if you were rubbing soap or lotion on a new baby's skin, you'd barely be touching them. Now you could have covered this with one of these sort of nylon nets or pieces of fly wire right at the beginning, but it makes for a boring video because all you can see is the white. But it certainly helps to keep that wool in place as it's starting to felt. This little tool I'm using is actually a soap dish and I stuck a handle to it, but I like it because of it's got those few ridges. A rolling pin is also really useful. This is a weird sort of old rolling pin where you can put cold water in. We call these pool noodles in Australia. I'm sure you have them wherever you live. They're quite useful items. So here I'm using it to roll the felt like we do in other felt projects. And just like other felt projects, so I'm rolling it in the bubble wrap and the nylon. I'm not tying it together, but that's not because I'm clever, it's just because it's such a small sample piece. And you can see there that I am turning it a quarter each time and rolling it up again so it gets rolled in every direction. Don't be frightened to take a break. It can really help your work. And while you're at it, why don't you come for a swim with me? This is my local beach. I'm quite new at this, so please, I would love it if you would subscribe. Now, let's turn it over and work the other side. So I've got blood temperature water this time. It's still not boiling. You can see here I've done this at the right, this is a normal speed. So you can see hopefully that I'm not pressing heavily into this. I'm still just very, very gently. It's a gentle massage. And in between each time you'll see I use my hands. No wonder my hands are all red and wrecked. Again, I've added more water. Now I've got to get that water out. Now I use some olive oil soap sitting there in the background. I've put it on my hands and I'm gently massaging it in. I keep sort of trying to flatten the project, stopping it from felting in a lumpy way. It's like we're delaying the pleasure of it felting. The longer we do that, the better piece of felt we're going to have, because the more those fibres will come through the fabric rather than just sitting on one side of it and felting in a lump. I keep checking the other side to see if the fibres are coming through. Again, I'm wrapping it up in the bubble wrap, holding it up and letting that water drain out. It's kind of good to be doing this in a kitchen type area. You sort of need to be somewhere with a hard surface floor and a sink. So not using the pool noodle this time, but just using the bubble wrap. You could do this whole project just using the bubble wrap. Now, other ideas that we haven't used here would be wrapping this up and tying it up and putting it in the washing machine. You could, at this stage, you could try that a bit. People have great success with that. Now, just manhandling it, just that process of picking it up and waving it a bit. And keeping on rolling it from different directions. Now this is normal speed. I'm dropping it with quite a lot of violence, or as much as you can give a small piece of silk. Like it's going splat on the bubble wrap. So where there were holes and gaps, they're made a bit worse. So you can see, perhaps I could have fixed those up, and you might like to. I wanted to see what would happen in the spaces where I didn't put quite sufficient wool. Now you can watch it shrink before your very eyes. You can see each time it's just starting to want to pull in and pull in and pull in. And this little piece is sort of thing that is very useful for a bodice on a top where you might have used some sort of lining or interlining. You don't have to because you've got the wool, and it's such a small amount of wool. I could have this next to my skin on a really hot day and it would be really comfortable. Again, more dropping, lots of dropping at this point to full the felt. F-U-L-L. Can you see now? It really is going to shrink quite a lot. So just one last idea. Let's have a go with the electric sander. I could have used this a bit earlier, but definitely not right at the beginning. That blue plastic is IKEA shelf lining, and it's really quite thick and solid. We don't want that sander to be anywhere near the water. So I got rid of most of the water before I used the sander. About 6 seconds in each position will work well. And here it's going. I'm a great one for underfelting things, so in this project I made sure just when I thought it was felted just to keep going a little bit further. I certainly don't want anything that ends up being hard and stiff, but you're not going to have that with that tiny amount of wool and silk. More dropping. This idea of dropping from quite a considerable height is very effective. And I'm just checking to see if it has shrunk. Yes, it has, but I think it can shrink some more. So now I'm being very vigorous with my handling of this. There's no baby pats happening here. It's not gentle. This is quite tough. And again, you can see it shrinking. At least I hope you can. There we are, we're nearly done. And pretty much there we have it. All that pink dye from the sari that came out with the soap disappeared at the end. It didn't dye the white part. It stayed white and dried white. There's the original fabric so that you can see how much this has shrunk. We think of felting about that it's going to shrink about a third. And I'd say it has. Look at the difference between that pattern and after it has been felted. And there you are. See those fibres coming through so beautifully. Really well attached. See the different textures. Next time in part 2, we're going to use the wool to embellish the fabric on the right side. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope you'll have a go for yourself.